I feel like a child torn between a mother and father who are getting a divorce. I am in both of these communities. And I feel that this community is sitting here as if we really know what we're doing, and that other community is all wrong. The reason I think we need to look to ourselves as scientists, we need to look to ourselves. To say it's Ken Ham, it's that community, it's all about them, it's all their problem, and we know what's right, I think is a prescription for disaster. I sit between Christians and Jews all the time, and I love both communities, and I'm from both communities. And it bothers me when one community starts firing at the other and the other at the one. This is exactly what's happening here, I think. We're all sitting around, oh, it's terrible what's happening. One of the reasons for the distrust from that community toward people like us at meetings just like this, where we sit around and act as if we really know stuff and we've got this thing right. I've written 2 articles on origin of life. Nobody has contested the scientific claims. It has nothing to do with God. It's all about life's origin based on the science. On my website, jmtour.com, there's a tab on the right called Personal Topics. You go to Evolution Creation. I cite both of those articles there, and I'm coming out with a 3rd article for a moratorium on origin of life research, because there's so many lies in it. You make a little sort of thing and you extrapolate to the point where we really know where life came from, to the point that everybody thinks scientists know. Scientists are utterly clueless. And because we lie, because scientists lie with their projections, and they have deceived generation after generation, and they've promised delivery based upon this, and nothing has come in 66 years, 2/3 of a century since Miller-Urey. Nothing has come because they're all wrong on this thing. We come out with...
They're all wrong. I mean, I said it legitimately.
You
make a claim that they're all wrong.
All right, would you let me finish? And then you can ask it. But one of the reasons we know they're all wrong is because it's not leading anywhere. There's nothing there. Okay, so because when they say we have made a protocell, we've made a protocell. Well, what is that? That is a lipid bilayer, that is a liposome. To have a cell, you have to have ionic membranes that are going to open that up. You need stuff inside it. You need to have proteins expressed all over this surface. You change the structure of one of them. Just one hexamer of mannose. One mannose hexamer can have over 1 trillion arrangements. Any one of these is wrong, that cell dies. None of this complexity is addressed, and they complain, and they suggest that they have a path to the origin of life. The projections that they make based on a small result. There is a distrust of scientists just like us from that community, and it is warranted based on some of the claims that we have made. We just heard the rabbi say in 1919, a group of 80 scientists said that they should restrict immigration of a certain types of people. So what do we do today? A group of 80 scientists petition the government, and we go, whoa, they must be right. There's 80 scientists. 80 scientists can be very, very wrong about stuff. And we totally dismiss an organization. I can tell you what's happened to me because of my stance based solely upon the science that's been written based on origin of life, is that I have been excluded from getting grants. You say, oh, they wouldn't exclude you. Who would exclude you? I've had 2 federal officers come to me and say, you're not getting a grant from this organization. I like you, Jim, and I'm telling you what's happening. I had the Department of Defense, who I had funding for years, 17 years of DARPA support. I mean, I'm well entrenched with Department of Defense funding. I had somebody come to me and tell me that please apply for a grant. The program manager asked for my proposal. I called him, I said, it wasn't funded. What happened? He says, it wasn't funded. Above him, this thing got hit. There is a calculated attack on people that come against the science. You say, oh, our community wouldn't do that? Well, wake up. Your community does it. 2 federal officers shut down my program. This is why I file lots of patents, and I get support from independent industries. They tried to shut me down. I don't do origin of life research. I'm just calling it like I see it. And I understand the chemistry. Origin of life is prebiotic. It is pure chemistry. I understand the science. I read the science. I signed a statement in 2001 that says that we are skeptical of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. That came to me in a quick email. I signed that. I said, sure, I can agree with that. And as a result of that, I have been excluded from the National Academy of Science. This is the first time I'm saying it on record. And you say, how do I know? Because when I applied, they said to me, you will never get in the National Academy. I said, I've done as much as people getting in. You know what they said to me? You've done twice as much as people getting in. I have over 650 publications. I have lots of Nature, lots of science publications. And I'm not in. Because they have said to me, you will not get in because you signed that statement. Now, I did an exhaustive study talking to geneticists and biologists, explain to me evolution. Now they don't even believe in random mutation and natural selection accounting for the complexity of life. They've switched to neutral drift, which is the change from a parent to a child, and they've switched to universal common descent. I said, well, why don't you then sign that statement with me? It is self-selecting. The National Academy is self-selecting. And so they keep people that are going to bring a contrary view to this, and this is our great society that's, oh, we're right and that other 100 million people are wrong? No doubt. Why they distrust this community? Because we have little gatherings like this, and we come against them as if they're a bunch of blithering idiots, and they're not. I feel like a child torn between a mother and father who are fighting in a divorce here. And I'm like saying, would you guys just get along? If you would understand where they're coming from, if you would tell them the truth, this is what we know. This is our conjecture based on what we know. Rather than saying, this is what we know and that's the way it is, and if you argue with it, you're wrong because 80 scientists agree with this, or 99% of the National Academy. That 1% is old guys who got in there before this was an issue, and as soon as they die off, you will have complete unanimity in the National Academy of Science, because the National Academy of Science is self-selecting. So this is what we're doing. This is an exact representation of what the scientific community is, and it's not going to get any better at this rate. I am calling for peace here. I am calling for an understanding here why these people doubt scientists. Why is this? Because we sit around like we in the Northeast, in Boston, and we really understand this, and those idiots in the South don't understand this. Well, they're not stupid. Those Texas oil men have made a lot of money, not because they're stupid. You go out and try to make a lot of money. Go ahead, give it a try. It's not easy. They're not stupid, but when you start projecting, when our community starts projecting that we know something, and we are sure of it, and we really don't know for sure, then it's a real problem. Some of the same people that were pushing global warming were 30 years ago, I know them, were pushing global cooling. The same people. So, of course, the community is going to have distrust here. What can I believe? You can't just jerk them around like this. You have to say, this is what we know about science, and this is our conjecture based on this. This is not fact. This is a theory of evolution, and there are real problems with evolution. And I listed on my website. I'm not saying that evolution is wrong. I can't prove that. How can I prove evolution is wrong? But what I can say is that you look at Project ENCODE, where they're finding in 98.5% of the human DNA that used to be called junk DNA, which is now called intergenic DNA more accurately, we're finding lots of protein coding genes that build the body that are unique, not in the chimpanzee, but to humans. Same with orphan genes. And at first they said, well, there's only 100 or so of those. Now there's thousands. Every year there's more thousands being added. So you have to account for this. So of course, and I say exactly on my website, you shouldn't stop teaching evolution in school, but maybe what you want to do is teach universal common descent and ENCODE and orphan genes, that they're still building a body of evidence, and there's problems with this. It's not a fact yet. And that's what happens to the community, and you get isolation. And I love both of these communities, and I feel apart. But this community, the scientific community, is cutting off James Tour from scientific funding for my saying exactly what I'm saying now. And you may think yourself so tolerant and so wonderful that you would never do that. But that's exactly what the community is doing. And 2 federal officers that know me, have known me for years, came to me and told me. They said, we couldn't even write this to you. We didn't want to even tell you on the phone. but this is what's happening to you, and they're trying to shoot you down and close you down. And that's why I've gone to this industrial funding, and I still have had to cut down my group from 45 to 30, but I still have a group of 30, and it's industrially funded, because they're trying to shut me down, because I am coming out and saying, hey guys, there are problems here. Let's not project above what we have, and let's embrace this community. If we would just reach out, and I go into churches and I speak, and I try to reason with them, the scientific community, I say, they don't hate you. They don't hate you. They're not looking to destroy you. This is the sense that they get. And you sit in the community, think about this. If they had heard this conversation, if this film goes out and you post this film and they hear a bunch of scientists sitting around speaking, bad-mouthing their community like this, you're gonna see people rise up and say, the heck with that community. We're gonna vote people in office that are gonna cut out your stinking research funds. You wanna treat us like that? We'll cut out your research funds, and that's exactly what they're coming against. You wonder why research funding isn't going up? You wonder why there's all these Republicans being voted in that don't care at all about science? Well, wake up. It's because of us. It's because of what we say. It's because of what we do that we alienate this community, and they'll vote en masse. And they'll put people in office that don't support us anymore, and we'll be the ones responsible for it because we've shot this thing down. We've shot ourselves in the foot. We're the ones who've done it. Now, to your question, I don't know that they're all wrong. That I misspoke, but what I can say, and in all my articles, I just say, you can't claim this, you can't claim this. You have extrapolated this to the understanding of how you know life has originated when you are not even close. You can't make the nucleic acids, you can't make the chiral carbohydrates, you can't make the chiral proteins, and then you want to have all these things assembled. And so from the chemical side, they're clueless. From the assembly side, there's very few people in the world that know how to build molecules and know how to assemble them into working systems. But by what I mean very few, it's less than about 25 people in the world. I happen to be among that unique group that makes molecules and then assembles them into a functioning system. Both of those are the two areas within origin of life. Both of those systems are so way behind what they have projected. I will have another article, I'd be glad to send you a preprint, where I'm calling for this moratorium, where I spell it out and I show example after example of the claim that was made based on what they found scientifically. So I hope I answered your question.
I want to fully associate with what Jim just said. I should mention that I'm also a signatory of that particular petition that got him into trouble. And I've been trying in a more delicate way to make the same points around here. I think that you're using this term evolution in different ways. I mean, he makes the point that I think we can justify if you limit the word evolution to mean common descent. But the word evolution also carries a connotation that, unless you make it very clear what you're talking about, can also mean just evolution by Darwin methods, by natural selection acting on random mutations in which there is no really solid good evidence. And as he points out, the evolutionists themselves have now rejected it. So I think we have to be very careful in using our language, and as Jim said, we have to be very precise as scientists to distinguish between what we are projecting and what we actually know. So I am in full support of what Jim just said.
James, I want to ask you something. You described very well the state of what we know now. But I would like to ask you, without disregarding the communities, just yourself, James Turrell, would you change your opinion if there was a proof, if we could emulate, if we could make a cell in the lab? Would it change your mind about the whole issue of the origin of life?
Well, if we could make a cell...
2 years, you'll make it.
Okay, if we could make a cell in the lab, but you have to qualify. So people have taken a genome that they've built.
Right.
They have a cell, they pull the genome out, they take the one that they made in. I have a Fiat, I take out the engine
No,
and I
you'll
put
take
it
it
into
from
a Ford.
scratch. You'll manage to make it from
It-
scratch.
Yeah, if they manage to make it from scratch in a way that mimics what would be available on prebiotic earth. So
Right.
you take hydrogen cyanide, you take formaldehyde, and you build this thing up, yeah, then I would say, hey, you guys have shown this thing. It really starts to look like, hey, these pieces could come together.
Well,
And that
still
may
you'd
happen.
think that faith is something else
No,
and it
no,
has
no,
nothing
then-
to
then-
do with the...
No, if these guys have demonstrated this sort of thing, I'd say, hey, you guys really did it, and we might be able to do that in 100 years.
Right.
We might be able to do that. It wouldn't shake my faith in God
It's
at all.
nothing, exactly.
Yeah, it wouldn't shake my faith in God because I believe in God because He came to me. He changed my life. I visit with Him each day. There's something there. My interpretation of the Bible is subject to change. My interpretation of science is subject to change. So I would say, hey, this describes how life could have originated. I would be the first to concede that if I saw it. So and if I saw it, it wouldn't shake my faith at all.
So we still can be open, even though the evidence is lacking, and maybe it's wrong, but maybe it's right. So exactly, your faith does not depend on this being right or wrong.
Right, and it doesn't depend upon my interpretation of the book of Genesis, because every time I talk to another scholar on Genesis, I get different views, because they enlighten me with new things. My faith is not built just upon my interpretation of the book of Genesis. As a believer,
Perfect,
my
right.
faith is soundly rooted in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. He's risen from the dead. This is what my faith is based on.
So, and when you now let's go back to the
Okay.
community. What do you think will the community of 100 million Americans that you say should be embraced? What will be their reaction if scientists will be able to create life a cell from scratch?
Right, and I think their reaction, if people like me, who they trust, would communicate to them, people have made, if I were to say people have made a cell in the lab from starting components that would be available on prebiotic earth, it looks like this could be a way. I don't think that they would mind at all. You know, they embrace me, even though I am entrenched in the hardcore sciences. They embrace me. They are willing to embrace us. They're willing to come alongside us. I don't think it's going to shake them at
So
all.
it's what they call the story and not the fact, the attitude and not the facts.
Yeah, the
The
attitude on
facts
how
are not
we-
the problem. The
how we
attitude
approach
is the
them.
problem.
And I can talk to a young earth creationist, and I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. And I say, based on what you see, I don't come against you. To me, that's not a central issue. It's not a central issue at all. If they want to get into science and do that, they'll figure out how to do. These aren't stupid people. This doesn't inhibit my science. This doesn't inhibit your science and your string theory and your multiverses. I tell you, I have a lot of trouble understanding multiverses. I'm not a string theorist. Whether I accept a multiverse or this is the sole universe, I mean, it doesn't affect my science at all. And it doesn't affect them how I love you. And that's exactly the way they are. Now, if you were to come against me and say, you know, you're really a dummy if you don't accept multiverses based on what we know about string theory, then I'm going to start resisting you.
And I would never say that.
And you would never say that. You would never say that. But that's what we're doing with 100 million people. And I think there's a lot of commonality between that 100 million and your Orthodox community here in Israel. There's commonality amongst them.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so because I think that they moved to the new state. We'll discuss it later.
Okay.
But I agree with you 100% that your interpretation of Genesis should not affect your faith at all.
Doesn't affect my faith at all. I'm constantly enlightened on new interpretations. I mean, you taught me things last night about Pharaoh that I never really thought about. That he viewed Moses as coming and doing a bunch of black magic. Why should he succumb to somebody who does black magic in front of him? Why should he say, take my property? I never considered this from Pharaoh's view. I needed this Jewish rabbi to have me consider the Egyptians' view.
There's one point of this is that when people say evolution, that okay, the scientific evidence, if they say that the scientific evidence is strong for evolution, that's taken to mean that we have strong evolution for evidence for how life originated? I mean, is that confusion?
Yes, the two have become conflated. Most scientists don't even know the difference between evolution and origin of life. They are clearly different. One is prebiotic, one is biotic. And even science professors, I had an evolutionary biologist in my university say to me 1 or 2 months ago, Jim, you know I don't agree with you on any of this stuff that you've just written. Well, the whole article was on origin of life. I said, so you're talking about origin of life? Or you're talking about evolution? He had conflated the two. This was even an evolutionary biologist who conflated the two. Most scientists don't even know the difference. They all think it's one and the same. They don't know how far we are in origin of life. Origin of life is in an embryonic stage relative to where evolution is.
So if we just made it more, if we say, okay, there's strong evidence for biological evolution, meaning, afterlife,
But what's that word, abiotic evolution?
Yeah, what I would say...
Well, I was going to go on to say...
Darwinism or directed evolution, there's a huge difference. And,
But it can be inclusive.
It can
say
be,
or.
but it's never presented that way. It's always
Well, I
presented.
wouldn't say never, I presented it daily.
Well, yes, but that's, yes.
Well, at least for one step. But
Right.
rare.
So
How about
what I
that?
say is universal common descent has a lot going for it. If you study that theory, there are a lot of convergent facts going well for universal common descent.
That's the
But
point.
then, but
You
then,
use that as that- you use that concept for
and that's what I say on my website. I mean, you go ahead, teach universal common descent, but then bring in the problems. The problems for universal common descent are Project ENCODE. This is not a Christian organization. This is a U.S. government-funded effort that's looking at the intergenic DNA, orphan genes, and show that there is not unanimity on this, even among scientists, because I'll tell you, there are other scientists like me that actually agree with me that are afraid to speak up because they've seen what happens to me. And this is silencing of a community. Most organic chemists who really understand what it takes to build a molecule, not biologists. Biologists never build a molecule. They buy a kit. Most organic chemists actually, in the back room, they agree with me. They say, Jim, you're right. We are absolutely clueless on this origin of life stuff. These
Now.
people... Yeah, now. They say we're absolutely clueless. We don't understand what these people are saying. And that's what they say in the back room. I sat with a National Academy winner and a Nobel Prize winner. I said, do you understand this? Do you understand this? You know what they said? Nothing. Because when they're together, they won't speak up. They just stared at me. They didn't understand it. They just stared at me. But when I get them alone, they tell me, I agree. I was at Weizmann Institute talking with a biophysicist. He was talking about the ear. There's a bar in the ear that vibrates, but the stiffness of that bar changes. The modulus changes as you go along. It's a tremendous feature here that allows us to hear all these tonal differences. And he's describing his research to me. And I said, how do you think something like that evolves? Give me a picture for that, how that would evolve. You know what he said to me? He says, oh, Jim, we all believe evolution, but we have no idea how it happens. This is what they tell me in the back room. This is the confession from the biophysicist at the Weizmann Institute. We all believe in evolution, but we have no idea how it happens. It takes a good Jewish man to express it like this. But this is what I'm saying. Only in private, but in public. When I start challenging people in public, they get very angry with me. As soon as I enter a lecture room, the whole tone of their presentation changes because they're going to be very careful about their extrapolations in front of me. Why should it be that way?
It seems like a problem is when on either side we are seeing lack of knowledge one way or the other and searching for it in the future as God of the gaps. That if we don't understand it, it means that God did it in a way that we want to do, to give God credit for it, rather than the holistic view of we will learn how, in some sense, God did it. It's, the God of the gaps won't work, and I think
Yeah.
that's a problem on
Yeah,
both
I
sides.
never speak God of the
No, I'm not.
gaps,
I'm
and,
just
and,
bringing-
I
I'm-
say in
I
my
know you're-
article,
I'm not
I
saying
say
you
in
are,
my
I'm just saying
articles,
that-
one
that
day
can
we'll
come up.
know, one day we may know, but it's far from today.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
you are. I'm saying
Okay,
that
I
general
understand.
attitude. It
Yeah.
seems like that can fit into it
Of course, because
from
if
both
you
sides
God,
wrongly.
if you believe in God of the gaps, then you shouldn't study because you minimize God. And that's not what Jim is saying.
No, I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying that sometimes that is
But
involved in the entire
that,
picture.
is that part of why maybe scientists don't recognize, I mean, you're saying that people are not admitting the gaps. And are they not admitting the gaps because they think that Christians will then, or, well, I shouldn't restrict it to Christians, but the theists or whatever will say now, okay, this is a gap that only God can fill. I mean, are they afraid that their atheist position is getting reduced if there are more gaps? Is that?
That's what I'm saying. It can be misused on both sides or
Yeah, yeah.
misunderstood.
Is misused on both
Okay.
sides.
Yeah.
But I'd like to kind of applaud what you're saying. I mean, I think that you're completely right. And I mean, what has happened to Jim is like it's very widespread. I mean, even Stephen Jay Gould, as famous as he was, like he didn't believe that gradualistic evolution worked, and he had a punctuated equilibrium model that he proposed instead, and his comments about, in which he was critiquing the received wisdom about how Darwinism works and suggesting something else. So his comments critiquing evolution are picked up by the anti-evolutionists and then used to try to attack evolution in general. And
Once again, be careful about this word evolution, because
yeah, I mean, we know what we're talking about.
Quotes,
Yeah, we know.
without doing it with his fingers.
But it's a very highly charged political environment where if you make a comment that the anti-evolutionists can use, they will use that, and then you will appear to be on their side. Robert Wright wrote a piece called "The Accidental Creationist" about Stephen Jay Gould. Well, I mean, Stephen Jay Gould was very opposed to creationism, but he didn't think the standard Darwinian picture was right. And I mean, I'm sure that you are called a creationist probably in the circles that are trying to keep you out of the National Academy, when in fact you're not. You're just trying to say, let's not make claims about science that aren't
I
true.
never said I'm not. I mean,
Yeah.
that's right. It depends what the word
Yeah.
creationist means, right?
Can I just, I think you do make a good point, because I know in UK, global warming, I think in lots of countries, is now regarded as a religion by many people. And so any questioning is regarded as you don't believe in it. So, I mean, I know a very eminent scientist in the UK who believes that the world is warming. He believes that carbon dioxide is going up, but he says carbon dioxide is not the main reason for global warming, it's water vapor. And reducing carbon dioxide will not have any effect on global warming because the water vapor is going up. He's tried to get his paper published. I mean, this man's a fellow of the Royal Society, right, already. He probably wouldn't be now. Right? And he gets rejected by the editors of the journal before it reaches referees, right? Because they regard him as a denier of global warming, which is not. And so there is this sort of fundamentalist view in other areas, including in your area, where it's actually difficult to question.
I'm called
Yeah.
a global warming denier.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
again, I don't think that humans are responsible for the observed global warming. And I might also mention another distinguished member of our community, Freeman Dyson.
Yes.
Is also equally suspicious of the models. He thinks that the system is just too complex to be able to say what the cause is.
Yes.
Now, I'm even more of a skeptic than Freeman Dyson, because I've looked carefully into the actual data, and I think that it's been manipulated. I don't think I trust the data anymore. I think they're making claims about the data which are not justified. So for this reason, I'm even suspicious of whether we've seen global warming. I tend to believe the satellites more, but they only go back to 1979. And I have a reason for thinking that a bias in favor of faking the data is eliminated from that, mainly because the people who are analyzing the data have no control over the satellite itself.
Right,
They're just using
yes.
publicly available data, which they're then analyzing. And I do know there are two main groups, one of which is a I'll call it anthropomorphic global warming skeptic group, and another one which is a pro anthropomorphic
So they're
global
biased
warming.
against each other. no?
Yes, but they get the same results. They completely,
yeah,
that's why I trust it,
Yeah.
because you have two different groups with opposite biases, and I know what their biases are, and you get the same answer. Aha, I can probably trust that. Also, I know how the mechanisms work, how the actual data is taken, so I trust it for that reason too.
But scientists need to be humble. Many global warming protagonists are not humble, right? They're quite arrogant people, and there's certain humility which we need to get in, and we need to have open inquiry, which has been closed down with you, and is closed down in many cases with global warming as well.
And it doesn't help to say anyone who is a global warming skeptic should be put in prison. And there are claims of that, public claims. So I think that Jim's comment, which is, I think, directed to us, I think it's very much
Much in
to the
place.
point. Yes. I mean, we have to very watch ourselves and be very careful in our language and what we mean by these, and say anyone who disagrees with us even slightly is anti-science. I mean, I disagree with my two colleagues here on quantum gravity, but I don't think they're anti-science. I think I'm right, of course, but they have a similar view of their views. And we are all agreed by debate, we'll find out in the end who's right, but probably none of us.
One question I wanted to ask you though, you
Thank
were,
you
I
so
should say,
much for
you were
providing us with
suggesting,
Yes.
a wider picture.
Yes.
you were suggesting moratorium
We'll
on origins
just
research.
do this in the recess. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll hear Aviram. Okay?
So what